What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Churchosity Podcast. My name is Heath Brady, and I am your host.
My name is Andrea Brady, and I'm your co-host.
We're just a couple of Gen Xers giving our perspective on church culture, and this podcast is dedicated to the Gen X Christians out there.
You know, the ones who just want to keep it simple.
The ones who just want to live quiet, peaceable lives.
We represent the generation of Christians who sometimes looks at what others are doing and thinks, whatever. But as it says in 1 Timothy 1:5,
the goal of our instruction is love, from a pure heart, and from a good conscience, and from a sincere faith. So what's up, Andy?
What's going on?
How's your week been?
I had a good week.
It's been a fun, busy week.
It has.
Action-packed for the Brady family.
Action-packed.
Yeah, there's been a lot going on this week, man.
It's been so busy I can't even remember what we've been doing.
That's the definition of busy then.
Am I crazy or what?
Yeah, no doubt.
Well, I do remember we saw a pretty fun, awesome movie.
Yes, we did. What movie did we see, my love?
Top Gun Maverick.
Top Gun. Turn and burn, baby.
It was great.
Oh my gosh. You know, I have to tell you, I was not a big fan of the original.
Nah.
Came out when you and I were in high school, I think.
Yeah, I think I just...
Circa 1986, if memory serves.
Yeah, it sounds about right.
And I remember it kind of being one of the dumbest movies I'd ever seen. Wasn't really feeling it.
It was iconic, though.
What was so iconic about it?
I don't know. It
Because Tom Cruise was in it?
Well, everybody liked that movie back in the day, in that a lot of fashions came out of Top Gun.
A lot of fashions came out of Top Gun?
Yeah.
Like what?
The aviator glasses and the bomber jackets.
The bomber jackets, yeah.
Yes. So.
Yeah, even Levi's started putting that wool stuff on the inside of their jackets.
Yeah, the Sherpa.
The Sherpa, yeah, I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, you know, for us Gen Xers, you know, it's kind of a big deal that it only took, 30 freaking years for them to make the sequel.
Yeah, practically.
But actually almost 35. But, yeah, we went and saw it, and got to tell you, loved it.
Yeah.
It's
Lots better than the
first. It's actually one of the most entertaining movies I think I've seen in a long time.
Yeah.
And that's saying a lot.
It had everything.
Yeah.
It had everything in it. And I like a good action movie. You know that.
I do.
And I like a good redemption movie.
Yep.
Those are always my favorite.
Yep.
So I have to say there's a lot of redemption in
Don't
this
spoil
movie.
it for the audience.
Lots and lots and lots of redemption.
But as a Gen Xer,
yeah,
to reaching out to our Gen X audience, this is a must-see movie for you.
Yeah, must see.
And that's all I want to say about it.
So
great movie.
In the style of Siskel and Ebert.
Two thumbs
up, yeah.
For sure. Yep, 100% agree. We celebrated a bunch of graduates from our youth group this week.
Wasn't that exciting?
Yeah, we got 8 kids from the youth group graduating from high school this year.
Mm-hmm. And we honored them with a special dinner. Yeah,
we had a special catered lasagna dinner for all the graduates and their families. Mm-hmm. Had a really fun time of fellowship and food. And then on Sunday, we honored them during the service. We had all of the graduates wear their caps. So it was obvious to the congregation who they were.
Yeah.
And we brought them all up front, gave them all a couple of parting gifts. Mm-hmm. And you made all of them candy lays.
Yep.
With regalia that matched all of their various high school colors.
Yeah, the ribbons, yeah.
And that was pretty exciting. I know it was really touching, especially the homework assignment that I gave all of them for their first homework assignment after going off to college and whatnot. That when they come home for their first visit after being gone for however long, they have to bring me a coffee mug at the church.
I like that.
Because it's symbolic of them asking me out for coffee for once. And we're starting a new tradition at our church where we're going to have a shelf in the office where that however long we decide to do it for, however many years we decide to do this tradition, that the graduates line up coffee mugs from their colleges or whatever, because we have one kid that's going into the Navy. Mm-hmm. But to have them bring home a coffee mug from their institution or whatever they're doing post-graduation, so that we're always reminded to be praying for them, to stay in communication with them, and to remind the graduates that our church is their home. It's their launching pad, and they will always have a seat at the table at our church. There was a lot of tears during the service. Our pastor preached on the subject of commencement, and it was pretty intense at one point, because one of our graduates is one of her kids. So
yeah,
it was all around. It was a good Sunday service, good Lord's Day service. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Also, because I got to do something that I have never ever done before in my life.
What was that?
During the Lord's Day service.
Uh-huh.
I was, first of all, given the opportunity to assist with presiding over the liturgy at church.
Ooh.
So I got to lead the congregational confession, the corporate confession. I got to lead the congregation in prayer, and I got to give the benediction. But most important to me was that for the first time ever, I got to distribute communion to you, my love.
Yes, twice.
She stuck around for the second service and double dipped on me.
I did. I wanted a second serving.
Yeah, but it was really, really special. You know, it was. I don't talk about the seriousness of the Lord's Day service enough on our podcast, but I'm very much a liturgical guy. I'm very much a supporter of corporate confession and corporate communion, and to be able to have the honor of distributing communion not only to the congregation during a Lord's Day service, but to actually have the honor of giving communion to you, my wife. It's a big deal.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
I must confess, I had to take all of my emotions and stuff them way down in my feet in that moment so that I didn't fall apart in front of everybody.
Yeah.
But it was a real special moment. So thank you for letting me do that during the Lord's Day service, honey.
You're welcome.
So along those lines of the graduates and the whole commencement theme, it's very kind of a good segue into what you and I actually want to talk about on this episode. Mm-hmm. You know, many of you out there, especially if you're a Gen Xer or older, you've got kids or grandkids that are graduating from elementary school, that are graduating from middle school, graduating from high school. Some might even have kids graduating from college right now. It is commencement season, but specifically in our wheelhouse, what we want to talk about on this episode is having to do with the high school graduates. Mm-hmm. What happens to the young men and women in the church once they graduate from high school? And in our culture, there's such a huge majority of young men and women who graduate from high school and go and leave the nest and go somewhere else for college. They don't stay close to home. And there are some that do. I mean, I know that not everyone goes to college, and not everyone goes away for college. They can stay home and go to college, or do college online or whatever. But the vast majority of young people in the church, once they're done with their high school years, they kind of fall off the radar. They kind of slip through the cracks in the church. And so we wanted to talk about that on this episode, didn't we?
Yeah.
And we wanted to kind of explore and have a conversation as to why that happens, why that tends to happen, and how we might be able to bring some sort of, reconnection or reprioritization of serving the young men and women in our church communities. I don't want to say a whole lot about this yet, so I think I'm going to throw it over to you, Andy, because I think you've got some things on your heart that you would like to share in regards to this.
Well, every church is different. Some churches might have a thriving college ministry, but I think I'm specifically speaking to the churches that do not. I think that most churches do not have a thriving college ministry. And I think it's a huge need in our church, in the church.
Yeah.
Even as far back as when I was in college, I can remember thinking, now that I'm out of high school, I don't have youth group anymore. What do I do? And I lived at home during my college years and went to school because the city that I lived in had a major university. To save money, I lived at home still. So,
and you live practically walking distance from your college anyway.
Practically, yeah. And so most of the churches that I've been a part of have not had a college ministry.
Right.
In fact, it was like well known at the school that I went to, the college I went to, which churches had a college ministry and which churches did not. And
it was well known?
Yeah. So
how was it well known?
If you wanted to go to a college youth group, you went to what? There were like 3 options in our...
3?
3?
In the whole college?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, I'm really surprised by that there was only 3 options for where you as a college-age student could have gone to church.
Well, that I could think of, or that I was aware of. It wasn't those were the ones that were publicized.
How were they publicized?
Flyers, people on campus.
Right, okay. Now I get it, yeah.
And so you didn't really know what you were walking into. I mean, I really think that, I went to a public university, so it wasn't a Christian college to begin with. But I really think that if you're sending your Christian young people to a public university, I mean, they could walk into cults and all sorts of things on campus. I mean, all of that stuff is well represented on campus. So, they have to use their discernment to figure out what they need, what they want to get involved in. So I think as the local church, we need to really step up our game, because for people who don't have a home church, maybe they're attending a university, or maybe they're not going to church right now, but would like to get involved with something, they don't know where to go. So I was kind of like on my own in that aspect. What I ended up doing was starting a ministry at the church that I was going to on Sundays. I took the bull by the horns and just kind of made it happen so that I didn't have to go anywhere else. I just started our own ministry at church.
For college-age people.
For college-age people. Yeah. We started with what we had. I mean, there were like a handful of people that went to church who were college age, and we just started getting together on Friday nights and having game night.
That sounds amazing.
And then the church, that wasn't good enough for the church. The church got meddled. They're like, oh, well, you guys can't just meet together every Friday night and have game night. We have to appoint somebody to be in charge of you. So they did that. And it was
some adult supervision,
I guess.
Well, I can appreciate that. I mean, I've run a college age ministry before, and the reason why I was pretty much volunteered to be in charge of said college ministry was for that very reason that you just said. I mean, it turns out that for several years there was a bunch of college age kids that were getting together in the old parsonage out behind the church on a Thursday night for 3.5 hours, smoking weed and playing video games. And how that whole event flew under the radar for so many years, I have no idea. But they hired a guy before they hired me, and they pretty much all but ran him out. And so I took over and cleaned that up. But it was fun. I think what was that, 2 years, I think that I ran that for.
Something like that.
The thing about that college ministry that meant the most to me, though, was that with the exception of like maybe one or two of the young people in that college ministry, every single one of those young people was serving in a ministry in the church on a Sunday morning or throughout the week. And, we understand, first of all, we're not like child psychologists. We're not behavioral scientists or anything like that. You and I, Andy, are just two Gen Xers who are 50 that have watched trends in the church, and we have a concern that it seems that in a general sense, in the church, capital C, the congregants are aging out, for lots of reasons. But when it comes to the college age men and women, there's not a lot of participation in church, that those folks are engaged in.
Right.
And so I kind of wanted to take some time and unpack that whole dilemma, for lack of a better term, and see if maybe you and I could come up with some reasons why it looks like that. And contrary to those things, like you mentioned, what a thriving college ministry might look like.
Right.
So right off the bat, I just want to say that I believe that the overarching problem in the church is that we have a problem with being consumers. Christians in the American church are consumers, in a general sense. We make decisions about church based on what that church can do for us. What does that church bring to the table for me so that I will want to stay there? What is it doing for me? How is it serving me? Those kind of things.
Right.
There's not a majority, at least in my life's journey of being a Christian, there's not a majority of Christians in the church that are saying, what can I do for the church? How can I serve the people in my church? Have you ever heard of the 80-20 rule?
Of course. Yes, I have.
For those who are listening who have not heard of the 80-20 rule, it means that 80% of the work gets done by 20% of the people at your church. There's this attitude that if there's a need in the church, that the 20% will handle it, and usually the 20% of the church is who?
The same volunteers that always volunteer.
Mostly the staff.
Yeah.
And then the volunteers.
Yeah.
The same handful of volunteers. And so, many of you might be sitting out there listening to me describe this kind of a scenario, and you're probably thinking to yourself, well, that sounds just like my church. I thought we were like weird or something. But you're not. It is a thing in our culture that's been around since the postmodern era of church, and there's a lot of consumerism that kind of permeates through all of our ministry models in the churches, even now in the 21st century. What that has to do with our conversation on this episode is that when we have young people who graduate from high school, now you've got a bunch of 18 through 24-year-olds that have no direct person to pour their life into theirs. And so I'm a discipleship guy. In my opinion, there should be somebody waiting with open arms to kind of pass these young people to and say, okay, now they're yours to pick up and disciple them through this next phase of life. Like that person should be there. There should be a group of people. You described, Andy, a perfect example of what happens in a church when there is a need and there's nobody to fill it, and so people just do it themselves. But then you make the church leadership look bad, and they're like, "Oh, we got to get involved in it now," and then they end up killing it, right? Yeah. Because there's no one size fits all for any ministry, really. If we're being honest here, for every church, every church is not the same, but there seems to be this kind of across the board for the majority of churches have this issue where young people graduate from high school and then they just slip through the cracks,
right?
Because there's nobody there There's no program there, and I use that term program very loosely because I'm not a programs guy. But like there's nothing available for them. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what the status quo of college age church attendance or lack of looks like. Mm-hmm. Would you agree?
Yeah, and I think it's hard because at that age you're all going off into different directions also. And you may or may not stay in town, but obviously if you're having a ministry, you're talking about people that are in town, that are around, that are going to be participating in something, perhaps like on a weekly or bi-weekly type of thing. What do you have what can you do? What's available? What do they want? I think, first of all, if you've been born and raised and going to the same church your whole life and you go to church with your parents, there could be like a desire to want to do your own thing. Mm-hmm. And feel like, this whole time do they feel like a sense of ownership in the church? Do they feel like they have a sense of ownership, or do they more or less feel like they've been forced to go to church all this time because their parents are expecting them to? I think once you graduate and you become an adult at 18, you start wanting your own thing a little bit. Mm-hmm. So how do you develop a ministry where the college age people are invested and this is their thing?
Right. Yeah, and those are really great questions. And one of the things that I would speak to that, in fact, I actually mentioned this when we had dinner with the graduates the other night, that now your faith is not the faith of your parents. Mm-hmm. It can't be. You're not saved through osmosis. You're saved because you were chosen specifically by God for salvation. Right. You were sealed specifically by the Holy Spirit to be His. Like the Lord owns you, essentially. You are branded by the Holy Spirit on your life. And that's exciting, because what that means is that you are now at a point in your life where you are able to speak into and live into that originality of your own faith journey. Mm-hmm. We've been talking the last couple episodes about our testimonies and how even though the same God, the same Savior, the same Holy Spirit was and has always been at work in my life and at your life at the same time, we are not the same. Mm-hmm. We're, it's not just because I'm a man and you're a woman. We're not the same because our faith journey wasn't the same.
Right.
The faith, our walk with Christ has not looked the same. And the same is, it is so incredibly true with kids who are graduating from high school, especially the ones that grew up in the church, is that those families that raised them in the church, they gave them the foundations. Mm-hmm. They gave them the baptism. They gave them the communion. They gave them the confirmation. They gave them all of that stuff. And now is the opportunity for them to take all of that information, as well as all of the information that they've gotten from their years of education, and take all of that and mash it together and understand what their identity is, especially what their identity is in Christ, mm-hmm. and then feed that, speak into that, live into that. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to the question of what is readily available for these young men and women when they step through this rite of passage across the threshold into, quote, adulthood, what's waiting for them?
Right.
And I think that's the $1 million question. Mm-hmm. Because I think that I don't think that there's a one size fits all answer to that, other than to say that we do our young men and women a huge disservice by having nothing available at all. True. Yeah. And you can look around right now, and I'm not saying, like you said, this isn't the same thing for every church across the board. Every church is different. Not all churches are going to be in the condition that Andy and I are talking about on this episode. But I will say that there is a big majority of them that are. Where you go to church this coming Sunday and you look around your church service, you look around your worship service, and you do a little mental inventory and ask yourself, how many 19 to 25-year-olds are sitting here in church today worshiping? Ask yourself that question. And that breaks my heart. It breaks my heart. I feel like I was the lucky guy in that when I was running my college ministry, that 95% of those college-age men and women were actively serving in the church in another ministry.
I see.
I had kids serving on the worship team. I had kids serving in children's ministry. I had kids serving in youth ministry. I had kids volunteering at Awana. I had kids volunteering in, just everywhere.
Right.
And I think that I was lucky. But almost every single one of those kids was in a unique situation in that many of them were homeschooled.
Right.
Many of them grew up in that church, and many of them called that their church home family. So they're like essentially serving the children of the adults that had served them.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
And it's like the next generation takes over. Right? And that's kind of what I want to speak to, is that there needs to be, in my opinion, there needs to be that kind of a model. There needs to be that kind of a discipleship where we're seeing the young men and women whose lives have been poured into by the adults in the church now pay that back, because they see what the church, they see what discipleship has done in their life. They see what the adult leaders in their lives have done to cultivate a right relationship with Jesus and an active relationship with Jesus, so that they would want to say, hey, I want to do the same thing for others.
Right.
It's why I got into ministry in the first place, because of what was done for me when I was a young adult and a teenager, right?
Right.
So somewhere there's a disconnect, somewhere. And,
Yeah.
it could be a lot of things.
Well, I think, speaking back to when I was a college age person, I needed fellowship more than anything.
Fellowship with other believers your age?
Yeah. Because especially going to school at a public university and not experiencing a very Christian environment there at all,
Right.
it was really comforting and nice to get together once a week with a bunch of other people my age that believe the same things that I believed, and to develop friendships with them.
Did you have to do that at your home church, or was it a group? Were they groups of people that went to different churches, all just getting together and talking about the Lord, or whatever?
Well, it started with just what we had. It started with just the people who went to church there also, who happened to be the same age. But then slowly but surely, people started inviting their friends who they thought would just have fun and to hang out with. And so it grew, I would say, to like 20-ish people, which for a smallest church, that was a good number. So I think that the core base group was about 6, and then it like tripled pretty quickly, because we basically just had fun together.
Right.
We talked serious stuff a little bit, and but mainly our main focus was fellowship.
Well, and that's great. And we were also, you and I also had an opportunity afforded to us because our youth pastor started a college ministry for, college age students. And because that church was also close to the university, the major university. And so there was an opportunity to attract a lot of college age kids from not only the major university, but there were also, within just a short bus ride, there were several community colleges, a couple of private colleges. Like that church was kind of right in the hub, within the hub of many college campuses or small college facilities or what have you. And so he actually had a pretty huge college ministry that served very similar to youth group, only you know, these kids are adults, so, you know, it's not like they hung around and played tag or did food relays or, you know, stuff like that. But
right.
a lot of times they would have concerts.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, some local bands would come in and do shows or whatnot. I know that the gospel was preached every Thursday night at the college ministry, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But again, those are different times. I mean, that's the postmodern era. You know, that's the Gen X model of doing church back then. And I'm not saying that that's the solution, but I really, really liked, Andy, how you were just kind of like determined within yourself with your friends at your church to be like, you know, we need to stick together. We need to do our thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I really like that idea. For me personally, I would like to see something like that happen at our church.
Yeah.
I really, really would. Because like I know of 2 young adults right now
mm-hmm.
who are they're out of college. But one of them in particular has been very vocal with me about how there was such a lack of stuff for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was telling me about this other church that's in the area that actually has a college age church service.
Oh, okay.
So it's like a service specific, like a church, like a Lord's Day service,
mm-hmm.
worship service specifically geared towards the 19 to 30 year olds.
Got it.
That demographic.
Mm.
And I kind of like that.
Mm-hmm.
I like that kind of a thing is available.
Right.
You know, but like I said, I look around my church on a Lord's Day service, and there are not a lot of 19 to 25 year olds in our church right now.
No, there aren't.
They're not.
Mm-mm.
And it could be for all sorts of reasons. One of those reasons also could be that in our culture, present day,
yeah.
there's a massive deconstruction movement.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of young adults that are kissing evangelical Christianity goodbye.
Right.
And, you know, the pandemic doesn't help with that, because then we started redefining what, quote, being in church looks like. So now being at home and watching a church service on your computer or on your cell phone or your iPad
mm-hmm.
constitutes participating in a Lord's Day worship service.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we've gone over that on previous episodes. So, you know, you can find out where we stand on that whole conversation. But I think that there's just a lot. I don't think that there's any like one size fits all problem either. Like, I think it's just kind of a little bit of all of these things.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't want to speak for all 19 to 25 year olds, but I think that if you're 19 to 25 years old, especially if you were raised in the church, that you're kind of like they're kind of like where you were at when you and I were that age, where like you needed fellowship with people your own age.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know a lot of 19 to 25 year olds that want to hang out with Gen Xers and talk about Jesus all night long.
And I don't either.
I don't.
No.
And I think that I like I said, I really like the fact that back when we were that age, that you and your peer group just took the bull by the horns and started your own thing. And I think that's so exciting. The idea of that excites me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I say that because, you know, these 2 individuals at our church that I know of, this one in particular, I have tossed the monkey back on his shoulder. Mm-hmm. Like, start a group.
Yeah.
If it means that much to you, start a group.
Right.
And
well,
I think
you need 3 for a group, I think.
Because if it's 2, it's just a couple. But if it's 3, now you're a group. Is that what it is?
I think so.
Will you be in my group?
Yeah.
But I think that is the way that we should be equipping people in the church in 2022. Mm-hmm. That, you know, we should be equipping and training individuals in our churches to use their giftedness for the glory of God within the local church in their capacity to serve. Mm-hmm. You know, if you got somebody who's 19 years old and still wants to come to church, but there's no, quote, program for 19 to 25 year olds, tell that 19-year-old to start one.
Yeah. I think the small group model really works well for college. I mean, it works well for everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, in our church, we have several small groups for different ages.
Oh, we have so many, yeah.
So we have like a young at heart type group that is for seniors. I don't know what the age group or age.
It's whatever you identify as young at heart.
Hey, they have some fun events, and I almost want to identify with that. Just
especially
so
if there's food involved.
I want to play. Yeah, exactly. Right. But do they have somebody in charge of those when they meet? Talk
that
about
the
the
church
Bible?
appoints?
Yeah, to talk about the Bible.
I don't think so, no. I think that's just an organically formed group. I think that somebody facilitates it.
Uh-huh.
I don't think that there's a person on staff that goes to that meeting and like babysits it and puts an outline together and says, okay, this week we're going to talk about such and such. Right. Well, I think it's kind of organically happens out of that peer group and whatever it is that they're doing.
Right. I'd like to see more of that kind of structure for a college group.
So what I think I hear you saying is that there probably are 19 to 25-year-olds out there in our churches that want to have their own group or have their own meetings or have their own programs.
Yeah.
They're just waiting for the church to give them permission to do it.
Exactly.
Without the fear of oversight.
Yes. Exactly.
Wow. That's pretty deep.
That's what thanks for playing along. But yeah, I know that
I wasn't playing along. That was an honest question.
Asking you leading questions.
Hey, I'm proud of the fact that I got what you were saying.
Yeah. Because they're adults.
Right.
And I know that they were just like yesterday, they were kids. And most of the adults in church look at those, recent graduates, and probably many of them can remember back when they were in Sunday school or when they were born. And yet you have to remember they're adults now.
Right.
And you have to love them and encourage them as such, or you're going to lose them because they don't want to hang out in a place where they're treated like a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I remember... Do you remember being treated like a kid when you were like around their age? Can you think about it? I can remember a time when I went grocery shopping with my mother. Sorry, Mom, if you're listening. But we went grocery shopping, and I was about 19, and we were in line, and I dropped something on the floor, and the woman in front of me picked it up and handed it to me. And my mom said, "Now, honey, what do you say?" And I about died.
I would be mortified.
I was so mortified. I was like, "Mother!" And I left. Like, I walked out of the grocery store and I waited for her in the car. I was so mad that she treated me like a child. And I did that. I have to confess, I did something similar to my daughter Audrey, who's graduating. And we got her graduation announcements. She's sitting there, and I'm helping her fill out the envelopes and address them as such. And she had addressed this envelope and showed it to me. And I said, "Oh, honey, you have beautiful handwriting when you apply yourself."
Ouch.
And then it's like, I sounded just like what I hate. I sounded exactly like my parents. And I was like, oh my gosh, I feel so horrible. Her handwriting is beautiful. And I couldn't just give her a compliment. I had to motherize it. And I'm like, what am I doing? Why did I do that? It's so motherly, and it's just so, ugh.
Gosh, if I had a nickel for every time one of the 5 kids said to me, "Dad, you're being overly fatherly right now." It's so true.
Oh my gosh.
It's so true. We as a culture, we force our kids to grow up so fast in so many different ways by, giving them access to things that they might not be ready for, or letting them have more autonomy than we had even when we were latchkey kids. Whatever the circumstance might be, like, we expect our children to like be independent and individuals, and we can do the best that we possibly can to teach them that their opinions matter and all that stuff. But then when actually the rubber meets the road and they're now 18, 19 years old and we're trying to like overparent them. Yeah, that's breeding ground for some serious resentment. but imagine if that's the atmosphere in the church.
Exactly.
That you've got this person who is now an adult. Like, you got someone that is trying to learn adulting. And they've got jobs, they've got school, they've got homework. They want to serve in the church, and all that kind of an attitude does is drive them out. Yeah. You know, I don't want to be here for that. Like, I'm a grown up now. Right. You know, and that's those are tough waters to navigate, both as the 19 to 25-year-old and as the adult that's trying to speak to them or serve them or come alongside them. You know, those are kind of some murky waters to navigate. It can get a little interesting. Yeah, it can. But I would like to see, gosh, you know, I wasn't even expecting you to bring up that whole thing about when you were in college and you started your own thing, because I really think that may be the secret of growing a thriving college age ministry in one's church. Because I don't think, I mean, I'm a theology guy. Yeah. If you've listened to this podcast for more than 4 episodes, it should be crystal clear by now that Heath Brady is very much a theology guy. It's important to me personally. Like, if I was the lead pastor or an elder or whatever at a church, I would like to know that every single ministry revolves around sound doctrine and theology. True. Like, that's important. You don't want some Buddhist or some New Ager or some, atheist getting up in the mix and talking about a bunch of gobbledygook to your Christian college age kids. But at the same time, you want to be raising up those leaders. You should be raising up those leaders in your own church with the proper theology and doctrine, and with the proper, word and sacrament ministries in your churches, so that that stuff can be weeded out. Because in all of our ministries, Christ and the gospel must be put on display. They must be. And that's the theology guy in me. If you have a ministry that gets together and all you do is sit around and talk about movies and drinks and never talks about Jesus, then I'm going to be like, well, is that really edifying for the believers that are in that group? Or is it just some social club where everybody gets together? Now, does that mean that someone has to get up and preach a 40-minute sermon every Thursday night? No. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I am saying is that we should be encouraging the 19 to 25-year-olds to be in their demographic group ministry and have it be edifying for all of the believers, because no one should be left to their own devices, else they turn into a stumbling block for the majority. Exactly. Yeah. Because you don't want that. No. Yeah. And it's tough, because this is, it's kind of like when I coach football. My favorite age to coach football is the 11 and 12-year-olds. That's always been my favorite age to coach, because that's when the game actually makes sense and is a priority to the kids that are playing. When there's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and maybe even 10. They're playing because their friend Joey is on the team, or they're playing because they don't got anything better to do, or they're playing because their dad used to play and he wants their kid to play. All these other reasons, and they have different rules to make it easier or fairer for everybody. But when you get around that 10, 11, 12-year-old age, it's very competitive, because the game is taken extremely seriously. And you want to teach the game of football. You want those kids to get it. You want those kids to know at an early age the right way to play football, the safe way to play football, the smart way to play football, and create team. Well, the same should be true for our ministries. that now when they get to 19, they get into that wheelhouse, that 19 to 25-year-old range. Now is the time where life as a Christian, actively living as a Christian, begins to make sense. And at some point, you have to take your hand off the steering wheel and let the kids run the football.
Great.
Every once in a while, you need to look at your little 10 or 11-year-old quarterback and say, what play do you think we should call? You know? And those have been some of the funnest moments for me as a coach and in the ministry. You know, if one of those 19, 20, 21-year-olds came up to me and said, hey, Heath, would you help us get rolling? I would be thrilled to help somebody get rolling. But at some point, I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to be like, this is your baby. Run with it. I've done all I can. You got this, bro.
Right.
You know, I just think that that's discipleship. At some point, Jesus left the earth. At some point, Jesus told his disciples and said, you're going to do things even greater than what I've shown you. You know, like he discipled them. He trained them for the ministry for 3.5 years, and then he ascended to the Father. And those 12 men changed the world forever.
Right.
And we should be doing the same exact thing in our churches. And that's because I'm such a big discipleship guy. I think personally, Andy, I think you hit the nail right on the head. That our 19 to 25-year-olds should have their gig.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to have oversight.
Right.
To the extent that somebody from the staff, one of the pastors, one of the elders, what have you, has to sit there and keep an eye on it.
No, not to the extent of like youth group or middle school group, you know.
Well, yeah. Well, a lot of that is liability issues. I'm just saying, as a youth guy, I'm telling you, I wish that I didn't have to be there most of the time.
Yeah.
Because those kids are good kids. But
yeah, exactly.
You know, if somebody gets a boo-boo and they're under the age of 18, you know, that's a conversation, right?
Right. So,
yeah, I think that's good stuff, man. And, you know.
Yeah, it has to be theirs, you know, and they have to be invested.
In 2022, ownership is everything.
Yeah.
If you are a pastor or an elder or a deacon or somebody that's in a position of influence in your church, and you can't trust your 19 to 25-year-olds to get together without some sort of oversight, boy, I wonder where the holes in the cracks are in your church. Because if you can't trust the young adults, what does that say about the level of trust that the old adults have for each other? I'm just saying.
Yeah. Well, and I also know that sometimes it's hard to let go of control or of the idea that these kids aren't kids anymore. It could be a little of that too.
And maybe that because the concepts that you and I are discussing as possible solutions, that's doing something new.
Right.
And people fear change, and they fear what they don't know and don't understand anyway. But I say, you know, let them have their time. Because if you don't give people what they need, they're going to go find it somewhere else. And it's not going to be in your church. It's going to be somewhere else. And if their identity is in Christ, let them live into that and let them do it together. Let them travel in packs. Yeah, we don't want to promote the lone wolf Christian mentality when they're 19 years old.
No.
And that's a whole different podcast episode.
Yeah, it is. Well, I guess one thing I wanted to say was I think a lot of people, especially leadership in the church, when they think about starting a college ministry, they think about going on campus somewhere and drawing people in because they're thinking about numbers.
Oh, yeah.
But really, you need to start where you are. You need to start in Jerusalem and then move into Judea and then into Samaria.
Listen to my baby preaching over there from Acts 1. Dang.
Well, you know, start where you're at. Find who is already there and needs this ministry in your local church right now.
Yep.
If it grows into something where you are reaching out to a local campus, so be it. But I don't think that necessarily that's where you start.
We got to start in our own backyard.
Yeah.
And I think that is capital C, that is a church issue. Mm-hmm. That we don't do a very good job of cultivating and raising leaders in our own backyard. Mm-hmm. And I think that especially if there's leaders in the church that are brewing and getting ready to go and want to be trained for the ministry for the long haul, that if they're not going to be cultivated, they're not going to be discipled, they're not going to be encouraged in their own backyard, they're going to go somewhere else. Mm-hmm. They are.
Yeah.
It's not the end of the world if your 18-year-old high school graduate goes off to college in a different state halfway across the country. Make your church the place where they can't wait to get back home to, because they're loved and because there was always a seat at the table for them.
Right. And that's all we got to say about that.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of the Churchosity Podcast, the show with the Gen X take on church culture. And thank you once again, as always, to my amazing and wonderful wife and co-host.
Oh, you're welcome. Be sure to follow us on all the socials, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Our handle is @ChurchosityPod. Drop us a message and give us your feedback, because we would really love to hear from you.
And if you happen to be listening on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify, all we ask is that you just scroll down a little bit farther on your phone, give us a 5-star rating, and if you feel like it, also leave us a review. Your ratings and your reviews not only help popularize the Churchosity Podcast, but also make us a heck of a lot easier for other people to find. And you can also spread the word about Churchosity Podcast by just simply telling a friend to tell a friend what we're doing here.
Yeah, let them be a part of the conversation too.
But always remember that the goal of our instruction is love.
From a pure heart.
And from a good conscience.
And a sincere faith.
So we thank all of you once again for listening, and we hope to catch every single one of you next time on Churchosity Podcast. Peace.